Hello, my fellow nerds. So I've made 2 videos about how to write an autistic character so far, and they have helped both neurotypical and neurodivergent people alike. And I've also gotten requests for how to write neurotypical people for my autistic viewers, and I might make a video on it, but for now, take the advice in the past 2 videos and reverse it. And if you haven't watched the past 2 videos, go watch them now because that's important to understand the rest of the video. The links are in the description below. So last video was the spice that you could add on top of your character to make them more subtly autistic. Today we're going to be talking about other aspects of the spectrum that directly impact our lives more. These are traits that may actually have a greater impact on your character's personality, their daily lives, their hobbies, and how they interact with people. Autism is very apparent in how we interact with others. But first I gotta say that not every autistic person is an introvert. There are extroverted autistic people that exist. They're all just really good at masking. I talked about this last time. Masking is the reason why you may never know someone is autistic. It is a mechanism that some autistic people use to appear more neurotypical and be accepted in society. Writing masking can be pretty hard. Sometimes we do it consciously and other times it's automatic. It does take emotional energy from us though. We don't do it all the time. If we're around people we love and trust, we'll be fine, but in a place like a work environment, you best believe I'm sucking that all in. When done consciously, it's like stifling all your inner electricity and constantly worrying about saying something stupid. Almost as if you have anxiety. Possibly you mimic everyone and everyone else's way of speaking and movement, facial expressions, maybe even their entire statements. Showing that adjustment to fitting into everyone around them is a nice, subtle touch if you are writing masking. Maybe you silently stim by wringing your hands, or maybe the character suppresses their stims, causing them to need a break after about a few hours. Or you master this over time and just put on a persona for everyone and then just lay on your bed for 30 minutes when you get home. But mastering it over time comes through experience. It took years for me to get that good at masking, and I still slip up every now and then. Masking is your friend if you're not yet confident in writing an autistic character yet. Because some of us are so good at it, you would never know that we were autistic until we told you. When we are out and about and talking to people, the best way we do it is bonding through special interest. This is how I formed my social skills and learned to mask so well. I started at anime conventions because I felt less awkward and nervous there because I know everyone around me liked what I liked. And I could talk obsessively about what I liked and people would happily listen. Most of the time, our closest friends are our closest friends because they care about what we care about. You have to have one of my special interests or I'm not likely to be friends or date you. That's kind of just how it goes. We see this with Abed again from Community bonding over Indiana Jones. You could also see this through Abiko from Oshinoko Season 2. Peak autism right there. She has trouble bonding with people unless she's talking about manga. Rejection sensitivity, very simple. Some of us feel extra hurt when rejected and take it too personal. But in my opinion, neurotypical people often have this too. This normally gets a lot better with time. I've been rejected from so many things, I feel pretty numb to it. But some people take rejection very personally as if it's an attack on them. It's a very simple thing to write. Was it me or was it them? Am I too autistic for this job? Did I act too strangely? Or they just go home crying. Autism can affect how we do things in our daily lives, specifically tasks. Hyperfocusing is more of a thing in people that have the ADHD autism combo, the double A's. Basically, when your brain gets really hooked on a certain thing, very likely a special interest, and it just goes from there. You block out everything around you. The one and only thing on your mind is this thing. Everything else is pushed aside and you are in the zone. Even if that something is eating, showering, your house being on fire, or your actual work that you have to do. You also see this in Abed from Community going way too far with his prank. Due to the hyper-focusing, we can get too invested and put more detail than absolutely necessary into something. If you can focus on something, you are very fast and efficient at doing that thing, and if anyone tries to stop you, you will not be happy. It sounds great, but it often leads to... Demand avoidance is avoiding demands or situations that trigger anxiety or sensory overload, disrupt routines, transition from one activity to another, or involve activities or events that we don't have an interest in. When you're super invested in something, it can lead to neglecting other things around you, like your relationships or responding to people's messages, taking care of yourself, taking care of your home or errands, not wanting to switch tasks when you're in the middle of doing something, even if that other thing is urgent. If you try to get out of that routine or that hyperfocus, there will be this nagging force in your head that'll say, no, I don't want to, or no, I gotta finish this first. And it often leads to looking like this. Can you do the dishes? Okay, I'll do it in a sec. And then you just try to finish what you're working on and never end up doing it. Or God help the person who dare ask you to switch tasks, because that could also result in an aggressive sounding, okay, I'll do it later. This is also known as autistic inertia. You gotta finish what you have now or else. And if you have ADHD, you know that you will never finish it if you do not do it now. It can also come in the form of knowing you have to respond to that email, but you really don't want to right now, so time builds and builds until it's been weeks and you feel bad. But apparently this happens to neurotypical people too, so we're not alone, thankfully. For the neurotypical people watching this, draw from that experience, but apply it to chores, messages, studying, and self-care as well. A lot of us can develop also strict routines that we don't like being disturbed, which can result in a similar reaction. If you ask me to do a bunch of things at once, I'm going to get overwhelmed unless I stop and make a list, or else it will result in me saying, please slow down, one thing at a time, before making said list. Take a look at Abiko Samejima from Oshinoko. She has routines that don't like to be disrupted. She feels like she has to clean her teeth after every time that she eats. Basically, a simple scene like that would be enough if you want to represent this trait, or have the character live their life through lists like the rest of us. Special interest is probably the most famous aspect of autism. I talked about this in the last video, but I'll give a quick refresher. Special interests can be interests or hobbies that tend to overly occupy an autistic person's time, thought process, and life. A good example is this entire channel's origins. It's like hyper-focusing, but on an entire thing, concept, or hobby. I may not be able to communicate well, but when someone is talking about my special interest, I can talk for hours. I have to know everything about it, I have to collect things surrounding it, I'll spend hours or days researching it, and I'm constantly wanting to know more about it. This is how I wrote my first book. I may also look disinterested and tune people out if they stop talking about my special interest. And when they are talking about it, they might not even get a chance to talk. A special interest engages your mind. Whenever you try to break away, it calls you back. It can consume all of your time if you're not careful. It's like a constant craving for a concept or a hobby, and it can be really hard to break away from it and do what you're supposed to do. Special interests can also manifest themselves in collections, that person knowing absolutely anything or everything about a certain topic, being intensely focused or researching said topic, always constantly wanting to learn more and stopping at nothing to do so. Abed and Sheldon Cooper are prime examples of this. Knowing what happens in each specific comic and remembering every single detail about a certain character, that's because it's our special interest. And it can be really hard to get us to do something if it doesn't involve one of our special interests. I talked about interoception a bit in the last video, but I wanted to expand on it a little bit more because it's not just about the physical aspects of your body, but it's also about the emotional aspects. Alexithymia makes it harder to describe your feelings and emotions. Joseph Blade describes it well. I sometimes notice that I'm cheerful in the way I talk to other people. I notice my voice is happy, so I must be. Similarly, yesterday, I ended up raising my voice because I was, apparently, getting frustrated. A coworker once told me that it was hard to talk to me as sometimes when we are talking, something about my eyes just fill up with tears. I notice the tears but can't really explain why they are happening. We can't really describe why we feel what we do, and that can be really hard. Sometimes I can't describe an emotion I'm feeling, but I can use a song to do it. Even if that song may not make any sense. Maybe the lyrics are opposite to what I feel, and it's just the music that describes me. See, this is what music should have been about. It can be pretty hard for neurotypical people to write this, but I think I found a way for you to do so. Take your character. Now, imagine that character can only communicate through song or poem or some other art form. gather up a bunch of songs or poems that you think will relate to that character and convey their feelings. You're not breaking out into song or reciting the poem. Instead, rephrase the definition or messages of those songs into a strange analogy, or find a way to convey the pure emotion or feeling in those works without directly repeating or rephrasing it. Maybe have the character struggle and have a lot of nervous motion or stimming. Maybe they get frustrated and the other character has to state it for them. That's always a good out. This can translate to us not getting our attentions across well. Look at Abiko from Oshinoko Season 2. She has trouble communicating her thoughts to other people and feels like her assistants can't help her because they can't get her thoughts correctly. And this will also lead to trouble with the script writers. These are traits that impact the plot that happen to be tied to her autism, but they are more like an amplification for her original personality. She unintentionally comes off as rude when she means to be straightforward. Her inability to bond with people unless they're talking about manga, her special interest, also adds to that character and that frustration that she feels. These autistic traits are still a part of her, but they're not all of her. Infodumps are basically this whole channel. It's where I get started on a certain topic and I can't stop until I have told you everything about it. Even if we've moved past the conversation to another topic, or if you kind of want me to stop talking about it, my brain will not let it go until I have told you everything about my recent special interest. You get this nagging feeling that tells you, tell them about this, do it. And it kind of just never goes away unless you persistently force it down. And this often leads to oversharing. Abed from Community does this every now and then as well. This is another aspect of autism that is terribly written all the time. This deals with things like overload, situational mutism, hyporeactivity, justice sensitivity, and more importantly, meltdowns and shutdowns. Sometimes our emotions can be more intense than yours. Sometimes too intense. I get overly happy and excited about things that I like and it comes out a bit obnoxiously. And then other times we don't react at all to the things that we should. Sometimes I have no reaction at all to some negative emotions. I almost got hit by a tram once because I wasn't paying attention and some old German lady saved me and my brain was just like, oh, I could have died. Whatever. I have a crippling fear of death, so that was a major underreaction. My first night in Ukraine, there were explosions going off around me, and I'm just like, cool. I think I'll go on the Syria trip too. If you want a media example, we have Abed from Community waiting in that room for like 26 hours. I have a hard time with a lot of emotions. Like, I don't miss people when they or I go away on trips. When someone else is in distress, I feel like my responses feel rehearsed. Sometimes I can feel people's emotions, but other times someone could be sobbing over the death of their father and I feel absolutely nothing. And then sometimes it's the absolute opposite. It's not like either a person overreacts or underreacts. No, we can both over and underreact to different things. Sensory, task, or emotional overload can cause us to react badly. It feels like a pileup of tasks or emotions, and then I feel this crushing sense of being overwhelmed, and I just sit there internally panicking like, how am I gonna get this all done? I don't start crying anymore if you give me too much to do, but I can get a little annoyed and maybe snap at you a bit. But again, different people react differently. But if not addressed properly, or if they intensify, it can lead to bigger reactions. For a lot of us, situational mutism, meltdowns, and shutdowns are rare as adults and take a lot to trigger. The more extreme reactions often get better with time, which is what happened to me. Situational mutism is when you're so overwhelmed that you cannot speak. I've never had situational mutism, so I'll pull from another person's experience. It's kind of like a shutdown. Shutdown is when your brain sees fight, flight, or freeze and slams its fist on the freeze button. Your character may ball up or rock back and forth and can't talk. This is where character.exe stops working. I never really had this, so I'm going to point to some examples over here so you can pause to read them. And last but not least, we have meltdowns. Very infamous and terribly portrayed, because they don't write it from an autistic perspective first. This often involves crying, hands over ears, kicking, closing your eyes, and either repeating one thing or you just can't talk at all. For those of us who have experienced repeated meltdowns, normally we try to get to another room or hide somewhere if we can before a meltdown happens. Because they're embarrassing, and they're hard for us to deal with. Quinny's meltdown in Heartbreak High is a great example to draw on. I used to have meltdowns when I was a kid, and it brings up a lot of very painful and embarrassing memories. But for the sake of future representation, I will try my best to describe what they are like so that you can understand. Mine mostly just consisted of crying uncontrollably. We're not spoiled, we're not childish. It literally feels like being hit in the face with a wave of emotions. Like you get a baseball bat to the face, and the tears just flush to your face, and you try to stop it, but you can't. It may just be a totally normal situation. You may not even feel that upset or frustrated at all. It's just a slightly negative situation like, oh no, I got a bad grade. Or maybe you're really not understanding something, or someone's teaching something too fast for you. But that doesn't matter. You're crying now, and everyone's watching and whispering, and you just can't stop. And so you just ask yourself, why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Am I really just a spoiled brat? Why can't I stop? That is why it's so important to get diagnosed. You save yourself so much self-loathing and confusion and pain and embarrassment. You learn how to handle it properly, who to surround yourself with, how to communicate your thoughts better. Or you'll find out, as you're writing a video about autism, that it all could have been so much easier for you 10 to 20 years ago if you had only known what was really going on. I have a complicated relationship with my autism. There are times I ask, "Dear God, why did you curse me like this?" And then I take a step back and I look at things like my book, my channel, my ability to hyperfocus, my players, the friends I've made. If there were a cure for autism, I think I would actually hesitate to take it. I would actually have to stop and think about it. But if there was a cure for ADHD, I wouldn't even blink. Gimme. Autism can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes autism can be your motivation to create something wonderful, but other times it can be a barrier to living your life how you want to live it. It can prevent you from getting a job, going into a field you want, finding friends, finding a partner. I may have succeeded in a field stacked against me, but there are many others who do not. And that is for the next video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and until then, keep on studying.